Let's be honest, most men drift. We wake up, we scroll, we work, and then we just rinse and repeat. And we know we're softer than we should be. That's why I built the 31-day resilience reset. This is not a devotional. It is a field manual for men ready to stop drifting and start fighting back. So for 31 days, you'll train your spirit, mind, and body with scripture, prayer, and daily challenges that forge real resilience. Go to www.undaunted.life/31 days to download this resource for free. That's undaunted.life/31 days. Start your reset today. This is Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. It is better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman. That is Proverbs 21:19. Some of y'all are listening to this podcast today just because of the title. I know, I did that to you on purpose. But just wanted to say we are so thankful for all of our donors, guys. We cannot pull off what we do here at Undaunted Life without donors like you. And some of you guys fell off last year because we had a new system, because we got canceled from our old credit card processor. So if you've noticed that your monthly donation has stopped going through, it's because on the new system, it defaulted to 1 year's worth of monthly donations. And so it bumped you off on month 13. Go ahead and hop back on board. Be a donor. Undaunted.life/donate. Undaunted.life/donate. And also, if you've not left a 5-star review of this show, a 5-star review, or shared it with a friend, please go ahead and do that. And I just want to throw this out there to you guys. 31-day resilience reset. Some of y'all have done that. Undaunted.life/31 days. You probably heard the ad there at the beginning. Some of you guys just got done with that because a lot of you started on January 1st. You did it for the entire month of January. I've absolutely been blown away, and I just love the feedback from you guys for the 31 days. The reset for you guys spiritually, mentally, and physically. It's also kind of funny because there's like no sugar, junk food, or anything like that for a month. So it's funny listening to some of you guys, like some of my Dominion guys telling me like the first thing they're going to have, it's either, something like an ice cold beer, like a Reese's Fast Break or something like that, which is the go-to of all candy bars, by the way. I won't hear any other suggestions. But it's just been awesome to see you guys. If you need a reset, if you feel stuck, Undaunted.life/31 days. So we got a lot of quick hitters today. This is what we're going to hit. When performative outrage turns deadly. So we're going to talk about the killing of Alex Pretti, so-called journalist Don Lemon being arrested and indicted for assisting church protesters in Minnesota, the lawsuit alleging that the Christian camp Kanakuk covered up the sexual abuse of children for decades, support for gay people dropping in the United States, the left's wannabe Joe Rogan, Welch, saying that white evangelical Christianity is a cancer, the UK aborting itself to death, the NIH announcing it will no longer use tissue from aborted babies for research, the continued spiral of Baylor University away from Christianity, the latest moronic comments from Shane Claiborne, and a grisly murder that took place just a few miles from my house. So there were a lot of people that were probably expecting today for me to discuss the situation, the ongoing and continuing situation going on with Bethel Church. But honestly, a couple of my buddies have done a spectacular job covering the stuff going on with Bethel. So John Cooper of Skillet and Elisa Childers, who was just on the show again here recently, they did spectacular jobs covering all the different things about that. Cooper did it on a couple episodes and Elisa on one. So I'm actually just going to link to their episodes here in the show notes so you guys can check that out, because ultimately I would have just been repeating what those two had already done, but they did such spectacular work. You guys should just go check that out. But right here from the beginning, I want to share something before I get into my main subject matter, because every now and then I'll run across a video, right? Because the algorithm kind of knows me. It's usually hunting videos or jujitsu videos or, kids falling down because it's like the funniest thing in the world. But there was a video that popped up and it was from a tiny account, and this started to kind of go a little bit viral, but I just kept sharing it for a couple of days in a row. And then I finally figured out how to save it on Instagram or something like that. But I wanted to share this video with you. So let's go to that here. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I can't tell you like the chills the first time I heard that. So if you were just listening to that, let me tell you what the visual was. It was over 500 men singing the Doxology, which might be the oldest worship song that we have in Christendom. And they were singing it a cappella, and it was just spectacular. Again, it was posted by Men Sing Grand Rapids on their Instagram page. So Men Sing Grand Rapids. I think I put that in the show notes, but if not, you can go and find it. They've pinned it on the top of their account. But I've thought about this over and over and over. And so I've just been listening to the Doxology. I've been listening to some different people that have recorded some different versions of the Doxology. But here are some things that I noticed about the video. That's why I think it's important that you watch the video here on our YouTube or on Rumble. There's no music to drown out the voices. So no instruments, right? I'm not anti-instruments, obviously, by any stretch of the imagination. There are multiple parts that are being sung. And again, I'm not a musician. I don't really understand the parts, but you can tell that there's harmony going on. All of the lights are on. Wherever they're singing this, it's some church somewhere. Every single man is standing up. Every single man is participating and singing. And there's not a single man standing there with his hands in his pockets just watching what is going on. Isn't that so interesting? So perhaps another reason why a lot of men don't participate during the worship service, because again, I've talked about this a lot. This has been a through point and a theme of a lot of the episodes that I've done. Perhaps another reason why a lot of the men don't participate during the worship service at a church that sings contemporary Christian music, CCM, with all the lights down, with a huge, neon light and smoke show going on, and with the volume turned up to 11, is because the overwhelming temptation to the man, the individual man, is not to participate, but to watch, to be entertained, to be sung to, right? And then a guy kind of understands his own voice, and then he's singing this song, which was typically written either by a woman or an effeminate man in a lot of cases, and there's no place for his voice. But again, if we go back to that video, you know what, Landon? Actually, I want you to play the video again. So Landon, you're the man. Let's go ahead and play that video again of these men singing. So what did you notice there, guys? Every male voice was represented, right? Guys that can, and again, I don't know what any of this is called. I know what bass is. So you got guys really, really low on the register, and then you have guys all the way at the top, and then you have everyone in between, right? Every single voice is represented. So I think this video is very, very important for those lead pastors and those worship leaders and, elders of different churches that love to castigate their men for not participating in worship. Now, at the end of last year, I did I did two whole weeks of the Daily Blade where I talked about different styles of worship music. Because again, when people think worship music, quote unquote worship music, what they're actually communicating is CCM, contemporary Christian music, right? So think Brandon Lake, Shane and Shane, Phil Wickham, and I'm a big fan of all four of those guys, all three of those acts, right? But there's all kinds of different worship music. There's hard rock worship music, metal worship music, hip hop, country, indie, ska, like there's all these different ones. And so I tried to elucidate that in those 2 weeks of the Daily Blade, because worshiping God for men and for everybody is not an option. And worshiping God through song is not an option. But when these churches just keep trying to force feed us CCM and force feed us these songs with these lyrics that aren't biblical in a lot of cases, or they don't have parts, or they're being drowned out by the sound of everything else, like there's just something in me that thinks the worship in heaven is going to be a whole lot more like the video that we played twice on this podcast than it's going to be of a passion conference or something like that, right? And then you get into the whole issue. I've already mentioned Bethel. You have a lot of people out there like, can I listen to Bethel's music anymore? Look at the people that are leading that church. Is the music fruit of the poisonous tree? And I think there's at least a debate to be had there with that. But I want this to be an encouragement because I know there are a lot of pastors and elders and worship leaders that listen to this podcast. I'm super thankful for you guys. But you keep looking out at the men in the crowd with their hands in their pockets and you think, that man's probably not a Christian. That's not a good leader. That's not somebody that's taking headship seriously over his household. Why isn't he singing these songs? How about you try the Doxology a cappella with all the lights on? How about you teach guys a little bit? It would take you, 2 minutes to kind of teach them where their voice fits in the part of that song? Maybe approach it that way. Again, if you watch the video, every single man is singing, all of them, right? And you didn't have to guilt them. You didn't have to force them to do it. You didn't have to do an entire, sermon series on how worship is war. And that's not a shot at Joby. Joby knows that I'm talking about this. Like, I was at a worship night at his church where there was 3,000 dudes and every single guy was singing with his arms up. So I'm certainly not taking a shot here. But how many pastors across the country don't have that? They don't have 3,000 men willing to show up on a whatever night it was, a Sunday night or something like that, to get after it and to go to war via worship. But my goodness, guys, if you're tired of watching the men just sit there and be passive during worship, maybe change things up a little bit. But let's go ahead and get to the main subject for today. So I want to start this segment by talking about a new term that's been making the rounds. So it's actually an acronym that I happen to love because of how perfect it is. And here's the acronym. Awful. Awful. A.W.F.U.L. Awful. And it stands for affluent, white, female, urban, liberal. Say that again. Affluent, white, female, urban, liberal. And as you can tell by the title of today's episode, I think that awful women are trying to destroy this country, the United States of America. Now, I've got a couple of categories of evidence here that I want to break this down into. One bit of evidence is the eye test, and the second is voting patterns. So let's talk about the eye test first. So when you see a protest for some, left-wing cause, and so whether it's, the federal government trying to arrest and deport illegal immigrant criminals, or when the right for women to murder their babies in the womb is challenged, or so-called green initiatives are trying to be stopped, or when a black male is killed by the police, even if it's completely justified, just pick a left-wing cause, right, whenever it's riot season. Who do we see in the crowd? Well, we see a lot of affluent, white, female, urban liberals. And we can go ahead and throw, educated in there because most of these women became radicalized at a so-called institution of higher education where they were taught all of this leftist nonsense, where they were taught to protest. They were taught how to be outraged and what to be outraged about. And essentially all these women are feminists to some degree or measure, right? Certainly first and second wave, but probably third and fourth wave feminism now. So that's the eye test, right? But now let's talk about voting patterns. So I'm just going to throw out a lot of different stats out to you that kind of elucidate the same point. But there was actually a really great summary from Grok Research about this. So white, college-educated women in America have increasingly supported Democrats since 2016, since Trump got on the scene, with the education gap widening. So liberals, this is across all demographics, voted 91% Democratic in 2024. Urban voters favored Democrats by wide margins, so 60+% in 2024. And combining these, white, college-educated, urban, liberal women likely support Democrats at rates exceeding 80 to 90%, though, kind of the exact figures aren't always isolated. The Roper Center said it this way. In 2024, in the national exit polling, self-identified liberal voters went to Kamala Harris 91% and only 7% to Trump. The Washington Post said white women with a college degree were especially pro-Kamala Harris. Nearly 6 in 10 backed her, with similar shares in the swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. White women with college degrees This was for the 2022 House elections. They went Democrat 56% and the GOP 42%. Washington Post also cites that college grads went 56 to 42 for Kamala Harris. And the Associated Press said that urban voters lean Democratic. And in 2024, around 6 in 10 urban voters went for Kamala Harris. So if awful women had their way, what would the country look like? It's an interesting thought experiment. But literally, if these awful women, if you were to poll them and say, hey, you've got a magic wand, what do you want the United States to look like? Well, it would be abortion for any reason at any point of pregnancy and paid for by taxpayer dollars, which would lead to, much higher abortion rates across the country. Boys would be allowed to compete in girls' sports and use female bathrooms, which would, ruin women's sports entirely. There would be no prevention of transitioning children, even though that's not a thing, which, that would obviously just destroy countless lives. Universal health care, which would ultimately destroy the healthcare industry. There would be universal extended paid leave, usually for maternity or something like that, which would lead to the shrinking of many companies. Universal basic income. All gun rights would be suspended and firearms would be confiscated, which would lead to a second civil war in this country. Fossil fuel use would be abolished to make way for so-called clean energy, which would completely bankrupt the entire economy. The military would shrink significantly, which would be terrible for defense and war. Police officers would be replaced by social workers, and prisons would largely be abolished, which would, lead to complete anarchy and lawlessness. The right to freedom of speech would essentially be suspended, and quote-unquote hate speech laws would make their way into, what we have in terms of this country. And so, which would mean thousands or more would be arrested for speech or social posts or something like that, like what's currently going on in the UK. Private property rights would be suspended. Taxes would be increased to the highest rates in the entire world, thus allowing for all of these policies to go into place. Republicans would lose every election across the board in every jurisdiction, thus allowing for all these policies to go into place. So essentially, if awful women had their way, America would become a communist hellhole. But then this also leads to the next part, which is what would the country look like if only men voted? And some of you have obviously seen the memes and different things like what the country would look like if only men voted. And it's not even just conservative men, it's just men in general, okay? So in 2024, Trump won men by 12 points. He would have won the popular vote by somewhere between 9 and 10 million votes if only men voted. Trump won 312 electoral college votes in 2024, but if only men voted, again, men of all stripes, he likely would have gotten 358 votes. He would have picked up Colorado, Maine, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, and Virginia. So he essentially would have won 42 out of 50 states, which is just insane. So if women didn't have the right to vote, which is an interesting thought, at least, interesting thought experiment, and only males could vote, like maybe the heads of the households were the only ones that could vote, right? So if we think about it in terms of the ordering of creation and all that, this is what the country would look like. Abortion would be abolished in all circumstances, which would save millions of lives every year. Girls' sports would be for girls. Girls' bathrooms would be for girls, which would save women's sports and, prevent a lot of terrible situations for young ladies. Transitioning surgeries, right, for children and adults would be banned, and any doctor that performed those surgeries in the past would be in prison, which would save, countless lives. Healthcare would probably still be expensive. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. No universal paid leave would be a thing. It would not even be necessary to begin with. Universal basic income would not be a thing because people would be too busy actually working, right, which would give these people something of value to do on a daily basis, giving them something to work for. There would be reasonable gun rights and gun legislation, and the gun rights would actually be expanded, which would lead to a safer and much nicer society. Fossil fuel use would just absolutely go nuts in a good way, which would ensure our future, right? Which, from an AI and tech dominance standpoint, we need energy, and it would expand our economy considerably. The military would grow significantly, making us more fearsome and formidable. Police officers would get way more training and assistance, which would lead to safer communities, obviously. The right to freedom of speech would be upheld and probably expanded. Private property rights would be supported. Taxes would need to go up because our country would be flush with cash. Democrats would lose every election across the board, which would slow but not stop the decay of our society. So essentially, if men had their way, not awful women, but men had their way, the United States would continue to be the greatest country ever and for all time. Something to think about. But here's the big thing about these awful women. if they were to actually experience the societies that they envision, right, that they desire, it would go great for about 5 minutes. And then they would get both barrels of a totalitarian communistic dictatorship of sorts, right? They would finally understand what it's actually like to live in The Handmaid's Tale. They wouldn't have to cosplay it, outside of the Supreme Court building. They would actually experience it. And boy, oh boy, would they be looking for a bunch of strong, testosterone-filled, virile knights in shining armor to come bail them out. I've talked about this joke quite a bit, but Bill Burr, when he back in the day when he was actually funny and not just like a left-wing loony, he had this great joke where like there's no feminists in like a boat sinking or a fire or something like that. And so it's like, it's all about feminism and we're just like men and we should have the same jobs as men and it doesn't really matter. Like we don't even need men actually. And then the Titanic's sinking and it's like, they just, twirl their hair into pigtails and they go, oh yeah, women and children first, right? Like that's kind of the joke. But this is the exact scenario. Because let's look at women that live in areas that are these just absolute hellholes where there's no rights. These women they can't get educations. They can't drive. Like they have no rights whatsoever, right? And in some Muslim countries, like it's even legal, according to the dictates of Muhammad, the false prophet of Islam, to beat your wife into submission, completely legal, honor killings of women, all kinds of different things. But here in America, where you can literally do just about everything without being bothered, it's The Handmaid's Tale. It's hilarious. So these women might be awful, and they are, certainly, and ridiculous. But they are actually a powerful and growing voting bloc in the United States. So as I've talked about a lot on this show, there's a growing crisis coming with the next generation, right? And it's not just that they listen to terrible music and have stupid haircuts. It's that the boys that are going to be young men, they have never been more religious nor politically conservative. But the girls, or the soon-to-be young women, have never been more liberal and less religious. This is an absolute crisis. Again, that's kind of an oil and water situation, so you can't expect these people to get married, have kids. There's a population crisis happening in this country and against, with countries all over the entire West and all over the world. But this is a growing, terrible situation. And it's indicative of what's even coming here in my state of Oklahoma. And so Oklahoma is going to have a gubernatorial election this year. We're going to have a new governor that's going to be elected during the midterms. And so it looks like right now, a gal that I actually grew up with, Cindy Munson, is actually going to be representing the Democrats in, the governor's election or something like that. And so there's not a whole lot of people running for the Democratic Party. She's the House Minority Leader for the Oklahoma State House. And there's basically no chance that she could possibly win. But we have to think about the type of person that she is. And as we get closer to that election, I'll elucidate it even further because I've known her well and I've known her since, third grade. But this is a gal who's single, no children, never been married. And she is just basically an empty suit of left-wing propaganda. In her ad to launch her campaign, she mentioned, reproductive rights, which is obviously a euphemism for killing as many Oklahomans that are residing in the wombs of their mothers as possible. That's her lead foot, right? And ultimately, the only reason why she's running, the only reason why she's even a political thing at all is because she's a non-white, non-male, non-Christian. That's why. That's why she's running. She's checking some intersectional boxes, and all of these awful women just love gals like her. And so we've got this exchange of worldviews that's happening. And I think Oklahomans are actually going to be shocked at how many people are going to get behind a candidate like Cindy Munson if she ends up representing the Democratic Party, because she is going to parrot all the same talking points. Abortion for any reason at any point of pregnancy paid for by taxpayer dollars. She wants that. She wants the borders to be open. She wants more illegal immigrants in this country because, again, the census is counted by bodies, not citizens. And so when you talk about the apportionment of seats in the House, we want as many people in this country in those purple areas and red areas to try to flip the country in a different direction. She's going to want Green New Deal type policies, right? So she's going to go against basically the biggest industry in this country, which is oil and gas. She's going to just parrot All those left-wing talking points. She wants boys and girls bathrooms. She wants kids to have their healthy breast tissue cut off and their genitals destroyed. She wants them to be basically destroyed from the inside out from a soul level because of identity or something like that. She wants to expand LGBTQ rights. She wants to enshrine things in the Oklahoma Constitution that is completely anti-God, anti-Christianity, anti-anything that a normal, everyday Oklahoman would want. And there's going to be a good percentage of people that vote for that. And that's in Oklahoma, where every county is red and has been for a considerable amount of time. So are modern, affluent, white, female, urban liberals trying to ruin this country because they've been romanced by Marxism, taken in by collectivism, blinded by feminism, brainwashed by the universities, and their gullibility has been exploited by opportunistic liberal politicians? Well, yeah, that seems to be the case. But we shouldn't just write them off, because it could be easy to do because they're funny to meme and generalize and all that because they kind of scream and shriek the same things. We should probably get some noise-canceling headphones to diminish the hearing damage that will surely come from their shrieks and screams, but we shouldn't write them off completely and write them off as completely lost. And that's the key, isn't it? They're lost. Because fundamentally, these awful women need Jesus. You can't be a disciple of Jesus Christ and simultaneously act the way that awful women tend to do. It's impossible. Like the Bible can't be your highest authority and simultaneously act the way that awful women tend to do. Your desires and aspirations can't match God's will for your life and simultaneously act the way that awful women tend to do. So these women need the gospel of Jesus Christ. They need you guy, individual guy or gal listening to this, shout out to the 5%ers. They need you to evangelize them. They need you to help put the kindling around them that the Spirit of God will use to call them to the Father. Like they need you to love them in a way that God defines love and not the way that the world defines love. That is their only hope and also the only hope for our country. Hey guys, real quick. You've probably heard the phrase, ignorance is bliss, right? Well, some of you are ignorant about where the beef that you buy at the grocery store comes from and what it took to get to you. So that single package of grocery store ground beef can contain meat from over 100 different cows, sometimes from multiple countries. And if one of those cows was sick or mishandled in some way, it's mixed right into your dinner. So most people don't realize that some ground beef at the store isn't just beef either. It's scraps and trimmings chemically treated with ammonia to kill bacteria and then blended in to bulk up the weight of what you're buying. It's legal, it's cheap, and it's on the plates of Americans all over the country, usually without the customer ever knowing. So even if you buy what you think is a nice roast or steak, it's been passed from feedlot to processor to packaging plant, handled by people who will never eat it, and raised by farmers who will never see the end product. And in that journey, the cattle were likely fattened on hormone-packed feed, pumped full of antibiotics just to survive cramped feedlot conditions, and processed alongside meat from hundreds of other animals. And by the time it hits your grill, you don't know whose cow it was, what it was fed, or what's actually in it. I don't want you or your family eating low quality, jacked up beef. That's why I want you to use the official beef delivery partner of Undaunted.Life, Primal Beef. So Primal Beef is a cattle operation owned and operated by Sean Glass. He's a retired Navy SEAL that partnered with Jocko Willink to launch Primal Beef. So what makes Primal Beef different from other beef delivery companies? It's a combo of the following. All American Black Angus cattle, and the beef comes from one farm, and that's in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. The beef is all natural, no hormones ever, no mRNA ever. And after slaughter, the entire carcass is dry aged, then hand cut by artisan butchers, and then flash frozen to ensure that it maintains tenderness, marbling, and flavor. And here's another cool thing. For every box sold, Primal Beef donates meat directly to a member of America's Special Operations Forces through the C4 Foundation. So you can take pride in knowing that your purchase will help put literal food on the table for America's finest warriors. If you're still on the fence, it's probably because you've been eating too much soy, drying your emo tears with your bangs, and you've forgotten what real food tastes like. Primal Beef can help with that. Try Primal Beef out today by going to primalbeef.com. That's primalbeef.com. Use the promo code Kyle to get $25 off your first order. Again, that's primalbeef.com. Promo code Kyle to get $25 off your first order. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the quick hitters. When performative outrage turns deadly, this is where we're going to discuss the killing of Alex Pretti. So this is according to the Daily Wire on January the 24th. An armed individual was fatally shot by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis, and the firearm was taken by law enforcement on Saturday. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed to the Daily Wire that the suspect had a firearm with 2 magazines, but noted that the situation is evolving, with more details expected to emerge. According to Fox News, the shooting occurred around 26th Street and Nicollet Avenue. In a statement sent to the Daily Wire by DHS, federal authorities said that the incident occurred Saturday morning during a targeted operation for an illegal immigrant wanted for violent assault when another individual came up to Border Patrol agents with a semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm the suspect, but the armed suspect violently resisted. More details on the armed struggle are forthcoming. Fearing for his life and the lives and safety of the fellow officers, an agent fired defensive shots. Medics on scene immediately delivered medical aid to the subject, but was pronounced dead at the scene, the statement read. The suspect also had 2 magazines and no ID. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. About 200 rioters arrived at the scene and began to obstruct and assault law enforcement on the scene. Crowd control measures were deployed for the safety of the public and law enforcement. The situation is evolving and more information is forthcoming, it continued. So that last part was directly from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. So the thing about the videos on this case, because there are some things that you can watch and you can see basically precisely what happened, right? So even go back to the Renee Good situation. Once you look at the video, especially when you look at the slow-mo of her front driver's side, left tire, and how it was pointed at the ICE agent when she accelerated, and had there not been ICE on the road, she would have just basically ran this guy over. There's a lot of videos you can see where it's an open and shut case. You can see exactly what happened. Unfortunately, I've watched multiple videos from multiple angles and at different speeds, and it's actually very, very difficult to surmise what exactly happened in this situation, okay? Which leads me to say there definitely needs to be an investigation, because there is a chance this was a bad shoot. Absolutely. There is a chance that somebody did something that was outside of the regulations and their normal training. There's absolutely a possibility of that. I can see that in the video. But I can also see in the video that this could be a very, very justified shoot. I can see both sides of this. And the investigators need to interview all the officers involved so they can get to the bottom of what actually happened. But of course, no one can just wait for that, right? The reaction on the left is, Trump's Gestapo is murdering innocent people in the streets and all that nonsense. He was just a nurse standing up for his neighbors. So this is actually really interesting. So the left is doing something where they're talking about the fact that this guy was a nurse for the VA. Okay? It's a good job. He's helping people. But what they're trying to do is to say that he was, as a person, an overall good moral person. And that's one of their main arguments. Their main argument for that he was a good moral person, is because of the job that he had, right? ICU nurse. And yet, people on the left don't give the same grace to an ICE agent or really any law enforcement, right? They will reduce all of those people down to their jobs. And if anyone that does that job and does anything wrong or bad, they put the blame across the board on everyone that does that same job. But Alex Pretti was just a nurse. And they just ignore all the other things that he did that were inappropriate. Because I keep hearing from these leftists that he was innocent. He was just an innocent bystander, and he was murdered by Donald Trump and these ICE agents. Well, there was a video that came out a few days after this all broke, and it's a video from the BBC of all places featuring Alex Pretti. This video was taken within a week of when he was actually killed. Let's actually go to the video here.
On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36 and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat, and he walks away. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Pretti was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband. Here, he continues to stand at the scene.
So if you're just listening to this, we have Alex Pretti. He is screaming obscenities at ICE. He looks like a deranged lunatic, okay? He's flipping them off. He kicks out the taillight of one of the ICE vehicles. He's literally there to try to stop them from doing what they're doing, right? And so he gets apprehended at this moment. So this kind of gives you a hint as to his mindset when he shows up to protest ICE and some of the things that he's willing to do. But, overall, the reaction from the right hasn't been good either. I thought that Kristi Noem's statement right after this happened was ridiculous, right? She said many things that don't currently align with what we know. She made it seem like we know for sure that this guy was a domestic terrorist and he showed up that day with a firearm and 2 loaded magazines because he wanted to do maximum damage. That might be true, Kristi Noem, but we don't know that yet. Why would you say that? What an own goal. What a self-own. Why would you even say that? That might end up being the truth, but let's let the investigation play out. Let's try to surmise what's true as opposed to just running right to something that doesn't really currently comport with what we know. So I already mentioned the ambiguity in the videos where Pretti is shot and killed, but here's what we know for sure. Alex Pretti committed a crime while in possession of a loaded firearm. We know that for sure. So his crime that he was committing was impeding federal law enforcement. So this violates 18 U.S. Code 111, titled assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers or employees. Can't do that. It's federal crime. So also, he had a handgun with 2 loaded magazines while doing this crime. This violates 18 U.S. Code 924C, which criminalizes carrying, using, or possessing a firearm while committing certain crimes, and it imposes a mandatory minimum prison sentence for those convicted. This also violates Minnesota Statute 609.11, which specifically addresses possessing a firearm during the commission of a crime, and it imposes a mandatory minimum prison sentence for those convicted. So this leads to a very important question. Why was Alex Pretti even back on the streets to begin with? Again, I showed you in that video that was released by the BBC, he was trying to stop law enforcement. He was already breaking the law, and then he destroyed federal government property by kicking out the taillights of a vehicle. Why was he not in jail? This is an open question. Why was Alex Pretti even on the street to where he could even be shot by federal law enforcement? Because in that exact moment, he should have been in jail and he should have stayed there until he had had his hearing or had his trial and then was either convicted or exonerated. There's another quick note here. Isn't it so interesting that these political demonstrations, right, ramped up considerably after the massive fraud schemes happening in Minnesota were revealed? Is nobody completely interested in that? Are you not even the least bit curious, right? You have human doofus, Tim Walz. He can't even run for a 3rd term because one early 20s YouTuber basically started walking around and exposing all the fraud, a lot of it in the Somali community there in Minnesota. He can't even run for office. He's got egg all over his face. Wow. All of a sudden in the middle of winter, which is not normally riot season, there's all these riots, all these protesters, all these dorks out there with whistles trying to let people know, let violent rapists, child molesters, murderers, assaulters, thieves that are also illegal immigrants in this country, letting them know that ICE is here, stay hiding. ICE is here, go to another location, right? And we're not shocked by that. Again, these people that just think, oh, these are just protests that would have happened anyway. No. They're formulated, they're well-funded, and they get these very impressionable left-wing people, most of which who have some sort of a mental disorder and are probably on SSRIs, to do their bidding. So big takeaway on this one. Alex Pretti would be alive today if he had made better decisions. I know that sounds cruel to say, because he's dead, and there are, I'm sure, some people on this planet that are very sad about that. But if he had made better individuals' decisions as a man, as an autonomous man, he would be alive today. The same goes for Renee Good. The same goes for typically anybody that is killed by law enforcement. Think about the videos you've seen that seem awful and seem whatever. Most all of these people that are killed by law enforcement in this country were either attacking the police or resisting arrest. And they were typically doing that after they were caught committing some sort of a crime, right? This idea that, this random black guy sitting on a park bench eating a sandwich and reading his Bible, and a white cop's like, ooh, there's a black guy, let's go kill him. That's not a real thing. That doesn't happen, right? But you have these individuals, typically in the commission of a crime, they're caught, they resist law enforcement, they start fighting them, they're trying to shoot them, stab them, run them over with their car, and then they're killed for their trouble, and then we lament law enforcement? No, I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for Alex Pretti. I really don't. I feel bad for the people that love him. I feel bad for hopefully the people in his life that were praying for him, praying that he wouldn't be such a lunatic, praying that he would come to a saving faith in Christ. But because of his own decisions, he's dead now. And we shouldn't feel bad about that. All right, next quick hitter here. So-called journalist Don Lemon being arrested and indicted for assisting church protesters in Minnesota. This is according to Jenny Terre of Daily Wire on January the 30th. So I'm actually going to read this entire article, and it's in the show notes, but I think all the details are very, very important as we kind of unpack the story. An unsealed indictment reveals how ex-CNN host Don Lemon allegedly worked with protesters to storm a Minnesota church on January the 18th and keep terrified worshipers from leaving the building. Lemon was arrested Thursday evening and charged with conspiracy to violate the right of religious freedom at a house of worship and violations of the FACE Act, a law that in part prohibits the disruption of worship services, which the Biden administration infamously weaponized against peaceful anti-abortion protesters, according to a copy of the indictment obtained by the Daily Wire. He was charged with 8 others. For his role, Lemon claims he was attending the protest solely to cover it as an independent journalist. The new court documents, however, suggest otherwise. Before allegedly storming the church, Lemon attended a pre-op briefing where organizers advised him of their target, which was City's church in St. Paul, and provided instruction on how the operation would be conducted once they arrived. According to the indictment, he was also live streaming and explained to his audience that in Minnesota with an organization that was gearing up for resistance operations against the federal government's immigration policies, while also not giving away specific details to maintain operational secrecy by reminding certain co-conspirators to not disclose that they were going to the church. Lemon then stepped away momentarily so his mic would not accidentally divulge certain portions of the planning session, the indictment alleged. He also thanked alleged protest leader Nakima Levi Armstrong for what she was doing and reassured her that he was not saying what's going on. Before he arrived at the church, Lemon informed the live stream audience, "We're going to head to the operation. Again, we're not going to give away any of the information." As he headed toward the church, an unnamed demonstrator told Lemon that they had to catch up to the others, to which Lemon replied, "Let's go, catch up," as he continued to live stream, stating, "We can't say too much, we don't want to give it up." Lemon entered the church with the first wave of agitators and allegedly oppressed, threatened, and intimidated the church's congregants and pastors by physically occupying most of the main aisle and rows of chairs near the front of the church, engaging in menacing and threatening behavior, chanting and yelling loudly at the pastor and congregants, and or physically obstructing them as they attempted to exit and or move about within the church, according to the indictment. Lemon told his live stream audience that he saw a young man who appeared to be frightened, scared, and crying, acknowledging that the congregants' reactions were understandable because the experience was traumatic and uncomfortable, which he said was the purpose. Lemon also said that the whole point of the operation is to disrupt. He also asked Armstrong, who is the person that we should talk to? Is there a pastor or something? As she pointed toward the pastor, who said that he might have run away. Lemon then approached the pastor and largely surrounded him and to his front and both sides, stood in close proximity to the pastor in an attempt to oppress and intimidate him, and physically obstructed his freedom of movement while he peppered him with questions to promote the operation's message. Lemon was standing so close to the pastor that he caused the religious leader's right hand to graze him before he admonished the pastor, stating, "Please don't push me." Lemon even tried to block fearful congregants from leaving. At one point, defendant Lemon posted himself at the main door of the church, where he confronted some congregants and physically obstructed them as they tried to exit the church building to challenge them with facts about U.S. immigration policy, the indictment read. So even as I'm reading that, I'm just like, again, try that in a small town. Try that in a church in my community. My God, the number of dudes that are just waiting for an excuse, waiting on the day for something like that to happen so that they can let it all out. I'm just telling you, y'all went into the most milquetoast, chill church possible. But my goodness, if you want to avoid retribution, don't try that in a small town. So a quick note to all the Trump is arresting all the journalists because he's a brutal dictator, blah, blah, blah people. Message to all you people. There are a lot of journalists currently covering the nonsense going on in Minnesota right now. They're doing it right now. And so far, I'm pretty sure only Don Lemon has been arrested because he allegedly committed a crime, you dolts. They're not just rounding up all the people, all the left-wing agitators that are also pseudo-journalists. They're not doing that. Don Lemon directly and on camera violated the FACE Act. Right? Read the entire indictment. But he's arresting all these people. It's just nonsense. But my big takeaway here on this one, okay? A little bit of a wet blanket. Don Lemon's indictment and arrest will mean absolutely nothing if it's not followed by a conviction and jail time. Right? Because otherwise, all that the federal government will have done is turn Don Lemon, who's a very unimpressive person who basically failed in his media career. He was handed a media career because he was 1, black and 2, gay. But basically, they would turn him into a political martyr. I think by the time this episode comes out, he's supposed to do a lot of the different shows. I think he's going on Jimmy Kimmel. He's already a hero of the left just because he was arrested and indicted. So here's the thing, guys. Especially to the federal government, to the people that are trying to push this case, right? The people that are going to try this case. They already think you're fascists. These left-wing people, they already think you're fascists. They already think you're brutal dictators or part of a brutal dictatorial regime. So go ahead and put them in prison. Go ahead and put them in prison. Bring the hammer down, because I'll remind you, the Biden administration was trying to get 10-year decade-long prison sentences for elderly women that were praying outside of abortion clinics. They didn't walk into the abortion clinics. They didn't try to block people from going into the abortion clinic. They obviously weren't inside, so they couldn't block people from leaving. They didn't stick microphones into the faces of these mass murdering abortion doctors or the nurses that are assisting with these mass murders. None of that happened. The Biden administration tried to put them in jail for 10 years. And guess what, guys? If Donald Trump had not been elected, those people would be in federal prison. They would not be getting out until potentially 2028 after the next election. Hopefully somebody with a red tie gets in then. Okay? So they already think you're dictators. They already think Trump's a fascist. They already think all of those things. Great. Put him in prison. He clearly committed the crimes that you're alleging in the indictment. You have to follow through. You have to put him in prison. All right, next quick hitter here. The lawsuit alleging that the Christian camp Kanakuk covered up the sexual abuse of children for decades. This terrible story. So this is according to allaboutLawyer.com on January the 21st. The Kanakuk lawsuit refers to multiple ongoing civil cases alleging the Branson, Missouri Christian summer camp knowingly concealed sexual abuse by former director Pete Newman, who was convicted in 2010 of abusing children and is serving 2 life sentences plus 30 years. Survivors claim camp leadership received reports of Newman's inappropriate conduct as early as 1999, but promoted him instead of firing him, enabling abuse of hundreds of children through 2009, so for a decade. New lawsuits filed in 2025 allege systematic institutional failure, with some survivors winning the right to proceed after courts denied Kanakuk's dismissal motions. The shocking part, evidence shows leadership knew for a decade and allegedly prioritized Newman's popularity and revenue generation over child safety. So first of all, this Newman guy should already be dead, right? He should have had his genitals removed before he was hung from the neck in public. Okay, so that's what should have happened to him. This is an awful, terrible story. Everybody in Oklahoma knows about Kanakuk. I know a lot of people that have served as camp counselors there. It's had a lot of great things that have happened. But the thing that I just keep coming back to is why does it always seem to be the sexual abuse of children that gets covered up? The most prominent example of that is within the Catholic Church, right? We've seen the massive cover-up where they just move these priests around after their, these stories, these horrific stories of them raping little boys and little girls, right? They just keep moving them around. They keep hiding it, right? Penn State, right? Sandusky, he's literally in the Penn State locker rooms, anally raping campers that came to the Joe Pa camp, right? And all of that. And the university just covers it up. Someone brings it to Joe Pa's attention. He doesn't call the police. He calls the university president. University president knows what's going on. He doesn't call the police. They do an internal investigation. I'm sorry, what do you need to investigate? Which, by the way, let me go back to that story. When that story broke, and they said there was somebody that walked into the locker room and saw Sandusky raping this child, they made it seem like it was like a kid, like a teenager. No, this was a grown adult male that looked like an NFL tight end. And he didn't stop an elderly man from raping a child. So shame on that guy. Shame on that guy for the rest of his life, as far as I'm concerned. But in these situations where a school district, a camp, any type of religious organization, a church, when they find out about child sexual abuse, they always try to handle it internally. They call a PR firm to see how we can spin this. That's the default mode. I don't understand it. Because they're worried about the backlash. Okay, people know that sexual assault happens. Pedophilic sexual assault happens. You go to the police immediately. Well, they might leak it to the media. And, hey, there's someone on staff or there was a volunteer that was raping a child. Who cares if it hits the media? It reflects better on you that you reached out to law enforcement to start the justice process than, we tried to just get all of our ducks in a row to just make sure we didn't have a PR nightmare. So my big takeaway on this one, and I've thought about this a lot because, again, I got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Don't send your kids away to camp without you. I know that's going to bristle up against a lot of you guys because a lot of you have already sent your kids away to camp and, we just send them to camp with our church. Oh yeah, was it a camp like Kanakuk where one of the directors, one of the leaders was systematically raping children? And then the Christian organization just decided, knowing that this person was raping children, but he was a good fundraiser, to give him a raise and a promotion. Oh, but the camp you send your kids to, couldn't happen there, could it? Couldn't possibly happen there. How foolish can you be? And I don't care what church it is. I really don't. The church that I attend, your favorite church, the church you attend, the church with the pastor with the podcast that you like to listen to his thing, I'm sorry. Your kid can go to camp if you were there, right? And hopefully you are a very intimidating presence at that camp, because I can essentially guarantee you that there are predators at that camp looking for kids, right? Go back to that video that went viral several times over the last several years, but it was a convicted pedophile, which had gotten out of prison, right? He's being interviewed outside of prison, which how in the world did that happen? And they asked him, how did you figure out which kids you were going to take? Which kids you were going to kidnap and rape? He said, I looked for the kids that were isolated. I looked for the kids that, lived in a single mom household or distracted, weak fathers. Because I guarantee you, when I go to camp with my boys, right, I'm going to let everyone know. I'm going to let everyone know. I'm here. All the volunteers that I don't really know real well, all the leaders that I don't really know real well, they're going to see my face. Because if they even think that they're going to do what they want to do to one of my boys, they've got another thing coming. But if you're the distracted dad, just sitting here, I'm on my phone, not really paying attention. Oh yeah, you can just take my kid. Yeah, y'all go off on the woods and kind of do whatever you want. Oh, I'm sorry, what? Where's my son? He's probably fine. Fantasy football, video games, Instagram, porn. I'm just gonna be right here. What's the plan? What's the plan, guys? So I understand some of you guys got to work. Some of you guys don't have stay-at-home wives that can watch your kids all summer, and I understand some of you don't have, I don't have a great, grandparent situation where I can just drop the kids off, they're not conveniently down the street or anything like that. Man, I get it. It's difficult. But your job is to protect and provide for your family. You can't protect them if you're not with them, especially at a camp where these things tend to happen a lot. Hey guys, real quick. I know a lot of you train for very specific things. So maybe you've got a mud race coming up, a mountain hunt, a 5K, or maybe you just want to keep up with your kids, or you just don't want to let the old man in. But for a lot of you guys, whether you're working out at the Globo gym or even your garage gym, you get there and you just don't know exactly what to do. And so you just kind of settle for the same old workout routine, maybe some bench press, bicep curls, a walk on the treadmill, and you know you're not really getting the most out of your workout plan. And I want you guys to stop wasting time at the gym. No more settling. It's time for you guys to get a guide to help you reach your fitness goals. And that's why I want to remind you about my good friends at Mountain Tough. Mountain Tough is a fitness and mental toughness app developed by military special operators and mountain hunters that's becoming a global movement for building mentally tough athletes on and off the mountain. Mountain Tough is a native app ready to be downloaded on all platforms, so that includes iPhone, Android, Apple TV, Roku, and there's more. Once you sign up and download the app or access the website, you immediately have access to hundreds of exercise programs and literally thousands of workout videos, thousands. So that includes structured hybrid strength and endurance programs, daily workouts, the full exercise library, mental toughness training, the Mountain Tough community, and accountability. And you can use it all on the go, online or offline, no matter where you decide to train. So if you're just getting started, that's great. They have programs for beginners. If you have minimal or no gear where you train, that's not a factor. They have minimal gear and body weight programs. And guys, if you're wanting to get into or maintain elite level fitness, they've got you covered with programs for top tier athletes too. And for a limited time, Mountain Tough is extending Undaunted Lifers like you an incredible offer. Go to mountaintough.com. That's MTNtough.com and enter the code Kyle when you sign up for a monthly plan to receive your first month free after your 14-day trial. So that's 6 weeks free to make sure this is for you. I'm sure it will be. That is 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app in the world. So stop wasting time. It's time to get real fitness results. Let my friends at Mountain Tough guide the way. Again, go to MTNtough. That's mountaintough.com, promo code Kyle. All right, next quick hitter here, support for gay people dropping in the United States. So there's a very interesting article. It was actually an opinion article in the New York Times by Tessa Charlesworth and Eli Finkel. So you could actually read the whole article in the show notes, but I'll just read a little bit from it here. Unfortunately, new research that one of us, Professor Charlesworth, helped conduct reveals a darker truth. The decades-long rise in the acceptance of gay people in the United States peaked around 2020 and has sharply reversed since then. This reversal stunned us. In the 2 decades before 2020, visibility, recognition, and legal inclusion of gays and lesbians progressed in lockstep. Larger and more prominent pride parades, rainbow-lit landmarks, federal legislation of same-sex marriage. That progress translated into something remarkable. Americans' bias against gay people declined faster than any other bias ever tracked in social surveys. But at that time, the Charlesworth research team was analyzing new data showing that anti-gay bias had begun to rise. The analysis of an additional 2.5 million responses from Americans collected from the beginning of 2021 through 2024 revealed that progress had not only stalled, it had reversed. In just 4 years, anti-gay bias rose by around 10%. So again, you can read the entire opinion article in the show notes. These writers are obviously lamenting this new revelation. They're lamenting the trends that they're seeing. But if we need to put it simply, the quote-unquote gay community and the LGBTQ plus revolutionaries, they just overplayed their hand. Big time. They pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally people were like, wait a minute. This LGBTQ plus stuff went from being like, okay, I think I can just ignore it. Okay, y'all just do whatever you want in your own bedrooms. Just don't bring it into my library. Don't bring it into my kid's school. But then y'all kept doing it. You kept dressing up these gay men in these provocative, super highly sexualized female costumes, right? And then you're like, hey, let's have them cosplay in front of kindergartners. You just overplayed your hand. And to really elucidate that further, you guys have to read Voddie Baucham. I think it may have been the last book before he passed away, but Voddie Baucham wrote a book called It's Not Like Being Black. I think we put that as the book of the year a couple of years ago. It's Not Like Being Black, because he talked about how the LGBTQ plus revolutionaries, took a lot of cues from the, racial, revolutions that were happening in the 1960s, and they were using it to weaponize against the United States populace. But my big takeaway on this one is whether you're a Christian or an atheist, okay, so that covers almost all of you, whether you're a Christian or an atheist, gay bias, quote unquote, which is what these researchers called it, makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So let's talk about it as a Christian. So obviously as a Christian, we know that sexual immorality, the Greek word is porneia, is prohibited. So that is any sex whatsoever outside of the male to female conjugal union of husband and wife for life. So if you have sex before you get married, ding. If you have sex while you're engaged, ding. If you have sex with people that are not your spouse while married, ding, right? All of that counts, including homosexual sex. Don't listen to these modern theologians that are like, wait a minute, we've had a new revelation where words that we thought meant one thing for the last 2,000 years actually don't mean that. And wouldn't you know it, this new definition aligns directly with my political priors, right? Just ignore those people, okay? So that's if you're a Christian. It obviously makes sense that you would bias society against a sexual setup that does not lead to human flourishing, right? Two lesbians in a relationship, two gay dudes in a relationship does not lead to human flourishing. And that extrapolates out to families, to children that they might adopt, to gay men using the IVF process and surrogacy in order to grow their families. And they tend to always want to have male children, and we're not supposed to notice that. So that's the Christian side of it. But even if you're an atheist, right? You believe that time, space, and matter had a timeless, spaceless, immaterial beginning. You believe that there was a big bang, but no big banger. You believe that we are highly evolved chimps that just figured out language, pants, and fire, and that we evolved from fish, which evolved from goo, which evolved from stardust, which again, we don't even know how the stardust got there, and don't ask us to explain it. If you're one of those people, having a bias against gay people makes total sense as well. Because if it's just dog eat dog, if it's just Darwin, two gay dudes having butt sex doesn't lead to the propagation of the species. Two lesbians making out doesn't lead to the propagation of the species. It makes no sense. It's a waste. It's a waste of human DNA because there's no transferal of that DNA to another generation. Because again, if we are just animals, if we're just like the manatees and we're just like the grasshoppers and we're just like the elephants and we're just like all those other animals, then the number one thing that you have to do is pass on your DNA to the next generation. That's the only thing that guarantees your existence as a species. So of course you would have a bias against gay people, against lesbians, because it makes no sense. Even if you're bisexual. So sometimes you're a guy that sleeps with women, but you also kind of like to get railed by dudes. Okay, well, that time where you're having sex with a guy is stopping you from propagating the species. So it makes total sense that this is snapping back. Because if you're an atheist, it should have been that way from the beginning, a bias against gays. But also Christians and conservatives now are kind of getting a little bit of steel in their spine, and the cultural tide seem to be turning a little bit. To where it's like, okay, we're kind of okay with this. Okay, well, it's just civil unions so that you can visit your person in the hospital and get life insurance set up. Oh, okay, well, sure, y'all can get married, even though marriage is something that God invented for man and woman and all that type of thing. Okay. Finally, I think people have had it. Because when you overplay your hand, you should expect this kind of interaction. All right, let's go to the next one here. The left's wannabe Joe Rogan, Jennifer Welch, saying that white evangelical Christianity is a cancer. So she actually said this in a recent podcast. Let's go to the clip.
This is a cancer. White evangelical Christianity is a cancer. These are the worst of our country. These are the worst people in our country because they use their religion in two ways, as a weapon and as a shield. They weaponize it whenever they want to and say, we're on the moral high ground. You're a lesbian. You deserve to die. You're a lesbian. The cops shouldn't have revived you. Oh, your parents are Mexicans and they brought you over here. Yeah, you should go to jail and eat worm food. And then when you call them out on it, oh my God, they're after the Christians. How dare they? How dare they? We're so oppressed. White Christians are so oppressed in this country. And they want it both ways because in the religion, that duplicity is taught. You can be morally duplicitous. You thrive in cognitive dissonance. And so this is just a massive, massive problem. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that of this cult that I'm talking about, white evangelicals, I think over 80% went and voted triple trumped.
White evangelical Christianity is a cancer, she says. These are the worst people in our country, she says. These are the worst people in our country. Then she says, you're a lesbian, you deserve to die. Now she's saying this as if she were a white evangelical Christian. You're a lesbian, the cops shouldn't have revived you. Your parents are Mexicans and they brought you over here. You should go to jail and eat worm food. So here's a question I wouldn't ask her because she's obviously not really in tune with reality. Have any of you listening to this right now ever heard a single white evangelical Christian make any statement like that before? Anything that even resembles a statement like that? That person's a lesbian. They should probably die. No. White evangelical Christians are like, she's a lesbian. I wish she would turn over her life to Christ and, repent of her same-sex attraction and get out of all that lesbian, out of that lifestyle and stop sinning in that way. That's what white evangelical Christians would say. Then this awful woman claims that Christianity teaches us to be morally duplicitous. Sorry, ma'am. You're actually thinking of Islam. You remember back when I talked about Islamic collectivism and the rise of that, and I talked about the concept of taqiyya? This is what Muslims are taught to do. They're taught to be nice to your face and plot against you behind your back. That's how they took over a lot of Europe before the Crusades, because they would take advantage of the hospitality and the graciousness of Christians, welcoming them into their country, and then they would smile to their face and then plot to kill them when they weren't in front of these people. I mean, and also I just love it. I think it's super rich when people that don't know anything about Christianity, like this Welch lady, tell me what Christians believe and what Christianity is all about. That's like, why in the world would you even attempt to do that? Right? I don't know how to work on an F1 car. Imagine me going into the garage and saying like, all right, this is what I think y'all should do with the car. Should anyone take me seriously? No, because I don't know anything about it. I can see that that's an F1 car. I see the logo on the wall, but that's the extent of my knowledge. This woman has likely never read the Bible, but she's looked at a Bible before. She saw that it said Holy Bible on the outside. She saw a few Christians act and she's like, all right, I know what this is all about. And also, is she really claiming that white evangelical Christians are the worst people in the country? Is that really her claim? They're worse than murderers, rapists, pedophiles, child molesters, thieves, arsonists, terrorists. White evangelical Christians are worse than all those people? And also, ma'am, if you don't mind me calling you ma'am, which population cohort gives the most to charity? Do you have any idea? Oh, it's white evangelical Christians. And which population cohort adopts the majority of the orphans in this country? That's white evangelical Christians again. And which population cohort has the lowest crime rate of any other cohort? Dadgummit, it's white evangelical Christians again. That's not some sort of white supremacist statement. It's just a statistical fact. It's a sociological fact that's data-driven and data-backed. So my big takeaway on this one, Jennifer Welch might be ignorant and awful, which she certainly is. But as I talked about in that first segment, a lot of people agree with her. Like you can see the other person, if you watch the video, the other person during the interview, just pecking corn, baby. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're exactly right, Jennifer Welch. There's not a single group of people in the United States that's worse than white evangelical Christian people. That makes total sense, Jennifer Welch. Now, even though that doesn't align with reality at all, a lot of people agree with her, and they just agree with her because no matter what she says, they're going to agree with her. Because she's a left-wing individual. These people have a left-wing bend. There's some sort of mental disorders going on in there. Satan's working overtime in these different areas to control these people and to keep them suppressed. But that's a growing number of the population, it seems like. People that will listen to someone like Jennifer Welch say something so ridiculous and baseless and think, yeah, that's exactly true. So for you as an individual Christian male, you have to do your part to mock stuff like this. This is not an opinion that we have to really, truly consider. Okay, well, this Jennifer Welch lady, she said white evangelical Christians are the worst people in our society. That's such an interesting point. Let me take some time to think about that. No, it's stupid on its face. We don't need to take time to debate it. We don't need to have an open discussion. It's ridiculous. It's retarded. And we're not going to do it. So you should mock people like Jennifer Welch. If you're going to share a video like this, you don't share it to, let's have an honest debate in the comments. You share it to mock and deride someone like this that believes something so outside of the realm of possibility, and you make sure that you draw as much attention to the ridiculousness as possible. All right, next quick hitter here, the UK aborting itself to death. So this is according to an opinion article by Lois McClatchy Miller to the Daily Wire on January the 24th. In 2026, Britain will hit 3 grim milestones. This is crazy. First, it will see the number of deaths exceed the number of births for the first time in modern history. Second, a third of the babies conceived will be aborted. Third, the number of migrants in its population, 10.9 million, will roughly equate to the total number of children aborted, 10.7 million, since the procedure became legalized in 1968. So in other words, by ending unborn lives on an industrial scale, the native British population has created a demographic vacuum and now plugs with immigration, and in doing so has brought itself to the brink of quiet obliteration. So right to my big takeaway on this one. God's judgment is falling on the UK. I don't think there's any way around it. And the leaders of that country are doing everything they can to speed up their decline and eventual downfall. And I have guys in the UK that are in my audience. I get the DMs from you guys. And you are the guys that are not wanting to talk too loudly and share your opinions in a pub because the local magistrates are encouraging people to listen in. And if you say something that is even, vaguely hate speechish, they're going to call the local police, have you arrested. You share something online, like maybe you share that Jennifer Welch video and you talk about how she's a ridiculous harpy. Hate speech. It's anti-woman, right? Can't do that. And so I think it's very difficult to look at what the UK was, the empire that it was, that launched the United States. Now, we did have to kind of fight a war with you guys to make y'all irrelevant in our lives. So thank you for 1776 and whatnot. But at the same time, it is terrifying to see a Christian country allow itself to go this route. Unchecked immigration, unchecked Muslim immigration to the country. Britain is not for Britons anymore. You had Brexit, but then you have, they're literally killing themselves with abortion. And they have all these people that are not assimilating to a Christian, Western, or English culture. I'm sorry, your country's not going to survive. It may survive in name, but it won't survive in reality. Your economy is going to continue to fall. The demographic crisis is going to absolutely crush you. The rise of entitlements going on in your country, same here, but it's even worse in the UK, is going to lead to a fiscal disaster inside of your country. And you've created this enormous ship with this tiny rudder. So, I know I'm not normally the rainbows and unicorns guy and everything's going to be okay. Everything will be okay in the end, whenever when Jesus is like, hey, let's go back and let's go get my church. Let's go get my bride. But in the meantime, I don't really know what to tell the people in the UK. For the most part, you voted for this, right? You're lamenting the same stuff you vote for. It's the same concept here when we have people move out of these hellholes in America from California or Illinois or New York or New Jersey, and then they move to the free states of Texas or Tennessee or Florida or something like that. And then they vote the same way. They vote for the same nonsense policies and the same left-wing people that they left because the policies led to such a stunting of human flourishing in their old states, in their old towns, but they just keep voting the same way. Y'all voted for this, and you're getting it good and hard. All right, next quick hitter here. The NIH announcing it will no longer use tissue from aborted babies for research. This is according to the National Institute of Health on January the 22nd. The NIH today announced a new policy ending the use of human fetal tissue in NIH-supported research, marking a significant milestone in the Trump administration's efforts to modernize biomedical science and accelerate innovation. Effective immediately, NIH funds will no longer be used to support research involving human fetal tissue from elective abortions. The policy applies across the NIH intramural research program and all NIH-supported extramural research, including grants, cooperative agreements, other transaction awards, and research and development contracts. This action supersedes prior NIH guidance and reflects a clear shift toward next-generation, validated research models better suited to today's rapidly evolving scientific landscape. So you'll notice nothing in that statement talks about the inherent dignity of the child in the womb. Because as image bearers of God, we have irreducible dignity, don't we? There's no mention of that there. It's like, oh, we want to modernize. But here's my big takeaway. I mean, I guess this is a win. I've seen some pro-life people talking about how big of a win this is. But guys, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, do you know that abortions have actually gone up in the United States? The abortion rate's gone up. 2024, it was 1.14 plus million abortions. Now, the final number for 2025 will likely be 1.18 plus million abortions. I believe in 2023 and the year prior, it was just under a million. So the rate is actually increasing. That's for a lot of reasons. All these blue states have enshrined abortion laws into their state constitutions. You have abortion tourism, where you're in Oklahoma, you can't kill your baby, dadgummit, so you're going to fly out to LA, and then you're going to, take an Uber to the beach, and then you're going to wait there on the beach until Planned Parenthood calls you for your appointment. You're going to go kill your baby and then go back and get some more sun and drink some more alcohol. So that's a big thing that's happening now. Mail order abortion. Right. So you're basically sitting there and, you got pregnant because you had unprotected sex. Which obviously a baby is a result of that. And so you just order mifepristone and you order these different pills and you get them in the mail and you just kill your baby and then you just expel it into the toilet and flush it. Right. This is still happening. So again, I guess, yeah, great. I would prefer them not to use the fetal tissue from aborted fetuses for scientific research, but I think we're kind of muddying the waters with what the issue really is. All right, next quick hitter here, the continued spiral of Baylor University away from Christianity. So last year I did several episodes about Baylor. I talked about Chip and Joanna Gaines. I have no idea what's going on down there in Waco. It's like nothing but rainbows on the water, I guess, is kind of what you guys are working with. That's the 6-stripe rainbow, by the way. But this is according to a press release from Baylor on January the 21st. Baylor University's George W. Truett Theological Seminary announced today that Tish Harrison Warren has been appointed to serve as the inaugural C.S. Lewis Theological Writer in Residence in the Anglican Episcopal House of Studies. In this fixed-term appointment, Warren will not only contribute to give attention to her work as a writer and engage publicity and at the intersection of Christian theology and contemporary culture, but she will also serve in a teaching and mentoring role designed to support Anglican and Episcopal students enrolled at Truett Seminary. In addition to teaching a May intensive term course later this year with Father Matthew Autry, she will regularly be on Truett's main campus in Waco to meet with and mentor students. Tish Harris Warren is one of the most important contemporary voices in American evangelicalism, said Elizabeth Rain Kincaid, PhD, JD, Director of the Institute of Faith and Learning at Baylor and Associate Professor of Ethics, Faith, and Culture at Truett. In her writing and teaching, she combines a commitment to theologically informed cultural critique, personal formation, and commitment to the local church. Tish's presence at Truett will help us learn more deeply in our historical commitment to equip students for gospel ministry while also strengthening our expanded efforts to form students to serve as lay leaders and ministers in Anglican and Episcopal contexts. Warren is a priest in the Anglican Church in North America. So, there you have it. The university's seminary is going along with the charade. They have chosen to now go along to allow this woman to continue cosplaying as a priest or pastor. So big takeaway on this one. I'm not sure when exactly it happened. I'm not sure when they went over the precipice. But Baylor University has joined the growing list of universities that were founded as Christian institutions of higher education, but have since ditched biblical Christianity in search of approval from our atheistic secular culture. This was no more apparent to when I was driving south recently. I was going from Oklahoma City to South Texas. I was going to hunt with Mike Dragich of Project Savior Outdoors and some of the people that support that ministry. And Joby was out there with us. It was a great time in South Texas. Very, very blessed to be able to do that. So shout out to Sammy. You know who you are for making all that happen as well. So I'm driving, Oklahoma City, go across the Red River, and then, you hit Dallas, and kind of the next main city is Waco. So I'm driving through Waco, and on the left side of the road, you have McLean Stadium, right? Their football stadium. But just before that, you see this enormous billboard before McLean Stadium. And you know what it says? Faith in action. Faith in action. That's what Baylor's all about. Faith in action. We're the oldest university in Texas. We are a Christian private university. We're going to give our faith in action here. But regardless of what the higher-ups at Baylor would lead you to believe, no, women cannot be pastors nor priests. Like, you can't have faith in action of something that does not align with what is revealed through Holy Scripture. Because our highest authority has to be what the Bible says, right? And simply put, the Bible says that the role of pastor, priest, and elder is reserved for men. It goes back to creation order. Man was created first. Woman was created from men. They're both equal, but they've been given different jobs, different roles. So there's a direct prohibition in 1 Timothy 2:12. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. And then we get pastoral qualifications in 1 Timothy 3:1-7. I'll read a little bit of that here. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Not they, not Caesar. He desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. Gendered language again. And then we see elder appointments talked about in Titus 1:5-9. I'll read a little bit of that here. If anyone is above reproach, the husband of one wife, and his children are believers, right? We see church order talked about in 1 Corinthians 14:33-35. I'll read a little bit of that here. As in all the churches of the saints, the women should keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but should be in submission. And then we have the headship principle introduced in Ephesians 5. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. And also I would add that pastors are supposed to model Christ's headship over the church, right? Obviously. So you see, the Bible is not ambiguous nor confused on this subject. But Baylor is. Unfortunately, a lot of modern seminaries, they've gone the way of leftism, they've gone the way of progressivism, and they've gone away from the revealed Word of God. Okay? So, I've got some very dear friends in my life that are Baylor grads, love Baylor, right? They love the basketball team and the baseball team and the football team and all the different things, right? And look, I get it. There's a lot of nostalgia when you look at something like that. When a university reveals that they are a Christian university and they're dedicated to Christian values, but then they keep doing things antithetical to basic Christian doctrine, you got to think really hard about whether or not you want to expose your children to that, right? And that applies across the board. That applies to any number of so-called Christian universities. TCU, Texas Christian University, is very likely way worse than Baylor. Like, they don't even pretend to be Christian. They leave it in the name because it's going to be too hard to change the logo and the signage up all over the campus. But they have since ceased becoming a Christian. I don't know when that happened, but it was very likely before Baylor. And then we talk about all these seminaries. They're more like left-wing, operation centers where they're pumping out people that have left-wing progressive ideas on morality and governmental legislation, but then just a little bit of Bible here and there, but not the persnickety parts of the Bible that would challenge their presuppositions that are politically based, right? So it's a dangerous situation, but for all of you, especially if you're getting closer to kids launching, wanting to go to school, wanting to go to college, please just don't be asleep at the wheel. You got to be curious. You got to know, hey, I'm going to end up spending tens, but likely more like hundreds of thousands of dollars on an education. Do I want to send my kid to 4 to 5 years of indoctrination at a university that does not care about what the Bible says? Probably shouldn't do that. All right, let's go to the next one here. The latest moronic comments from Shane Claiborne. So if you don't know who he is supposedly a Christian and also a wild advocate for everything left-wing, and he's also a supposed pacifist. So if you actually go back, I'm going to put this in the show notes, but I actually had a debate with him on the Unbelievable show with Justin Brierley. They brought me on, his main thing is getting guns out of the hands of everybody. And so he would go on these tours where literally he would talk to tens of people who he would basically convince them that guns are bad, guns are evil, bring your guns up on stage, we will destroy them by cutting them in half. And it was actually interesting, if you go back to my debate with him, the first time I got a chance to talk, I was like, I just need to go right for it from the beginning because I don't know how long I'm going to get. I said, hey, let's say if I was a bad guy, I was a wolf, I was at your, little event, and you convinced someone very impressionable to come up on stage with their, their pistol or their AR-15 or their rifle or something like that, and you cut it in half. Who's probably the number one person that I'm going to make sure that I follow back to their car? Probably the person that's no longer armed. Okay? But also, as I proved in that debate, he's not a pacifist. He's not a pacifist. He's just somebody that's comfortable with outsourcing his violence. Because that's really the only two categories, are people that want to outsource their violence and people that just want help with their own violence. Because I put him in a scenario at the end because he lives in Philadelphia, an absolute crap hole of the city. And I gave him the scenario, middle of the night, glass goes break, shatters, right? He's in bed with his wife. He doesn't have kids as far as I know. And he goes to look. I don't know what he would be looking for, but he's not hiding under the covers. He actually goes to look, doesn't find anybody, comes back to the room where his wife is. There's the bad guy. He's in the door, jam. She's in bed, bad guy's in between them. And as we most likely know, if someone breaks in the middle of the night, they're not really there for your television. They're there for you, right? I asked him, what are you willing to do? He's like, well, I would call the police, which immediately proves that he's not a pacifist because he's completely okay with calling the police. The average response time for 911 in America is about 7 minutes. In Philadelphia, who knows? It could be hours. But he definitely wants jacked, virile, willing to be violent men to show up. He doesn't want a bunch of lesbian cops, fat lesbians showing up. He wants the big burly dude showing up, and he wants them to do violence to this perpetrator. But again, we're in a scenario where seconds count and help is at least minutes away. So what are you going to do, Shane Claiborne? Oh, I would do whatever I could. I'd grab a chair and I'd whatever. And I was like, I knew I was going to drag him out into deep water and to, choke him out slowly. But it's like, there you have it. We actually agree. We should be able to do violence to that person. But you don't want the fight to be fair in the favor of the bad guy. And I would prefer for the fight to not be fair in your advantage. Because if that same scenario were to occur in my home, the person doing this doesn't know where I am. They don't know the layout of the house. They don't know where my firearms are. And they don't know what I'm willing to do. Now, it's my job to inform them of what I am willing to do with, violent rapidity. But in those circumstances, I don't want the fight to be fair. So if he's got, 380 pistol and I've got, say, a, shotgun or an AR-15, I'm at the advantage. It's also my house. I should be at the advantage. So pacifism isn't really a thing. You should go watch the debate. I'll put it in the show notes. But this is actually according to a tweet from Shane Claiborne on January the 21st. And here it is. Jesus literally staged a protest in the temple, flipped some tables, and drove out the folks pretending to be holy. It seems pretty clear that one of the most offensive things to God is when people use religion to cover up their greed and bigotry. Rebuke it in the name of Jesus. So, Claiborne is using Jesus clearing the temple as a way to defend people rioting and illegally protesting in Minnesota because the United States federal government is performing operations to remove illegal alien criminals from our sovereign country. It's quite the stretch, man. It's a bold move. Bold move. Now, this is very, very dumb, and we can count the ways, but before we do that, let's go ahead and read the passages where Jesus clears the temple. So we have the first clearing. It's described in John 2, verses 13 through 17. This is early in Jesus' ministry after his first miracle. The Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and money changers sitting there. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And he told those who sold the pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a den of trade." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." And then Matthew, Mark, and Luke cover the second clearing. I'll read it from Mark 11, verses 15 through 18. And they came to Jerusalem, and he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold and those who bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and seats of those who sold pigeons. And he would not allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. And he was teaching them and saying to them, "It is not written, my house shall be called a house. Is it not written, my house should be called a house of prayer for all the nations? But you have made it a den of robbers." And the chief priests and the scribes heard it and were seeking a way to destroy him, for they feared him, because all the crowd was astonished at his teaching. So Shane's take here is very, very dumb for some of the following reasons. Here's the first one. The temple was God's house, which means that it is Jesus' house because he is part of the Godhead, right? So these leftist agitators in Minnesota and all throughout the world, they're not protesting in their own homes. They're doing it on the streets, and many of them are breaking the laws and trespassing in order to do this. So fundamentally, it's different. The second reason, Jesus did not tell his followers to defy the laws of the land unless those laws violated the laws of God. Right? Matthew 22, we see, he's talking about the obeying of civil authority starting in verse 17. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." The message, right, is be obedient to the human government, but God's authority is highest. And then our default posture should be obedience. We see that in Romans 13. I'll read verses 1 and 5. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. Now verse 5, therefore one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. The message here is obey the laws of the land, right? The laws of man, unless they violate the laws of God. And I got some breaking news for you. The immigration laws of the United States do not violate the laws of God. Thus, the people defying federal law enforcement are sinning. Period. And the third reason his take is so stupid is Jesus was railing against corruption of worship in his Father's house. Right? The corruption of worship, not local or federal legislation. It's a ridiculous stretch. So my big takeaway on this one is Shane Claiborne is not a serious person. Clearly not. And you should take nothing that he says publicly seriously until he repents of his secular leftism. I can't judge Shane Claiborne's salvation, but I can judge his fruit. And almost everything that he publicly proclaims does not jive with a biblical ethic. And so he should not be a thought leader that you listen to whatsoever. All right, last quick hitter here. Terrible, awful story. There's a grisly murder that took place just a few miles from my house. This is according to KFOR on January the 30th. Court documents say that a 16-year-old, Jordan Weems, told the Logan County Sheriff's Office that he killed his mom, 49-year-old Spring Weems, with a hammer and his fists, and then placed her in a trash can. He then allegedly cleaned up the scene and lied to his family about where she was. Police were out in the area earlier that day for a welfare check because Spring was reported missing. She was found by Logan County deputies after someone called 911 reporting that Jordan and one of his brothers were outside fighting. We initially responded to a fight in progress call. We arrived and found two juveniles fighting, said Under Sheriff Troy Dykes with the Logan County Sheriff's Office. A neighbor told News 4 that when she tried to end the fight, one of them told her, "He just killed my mom." So this grisly murder took place about 3 miles north of my house. And I live in Edmond, Oklahoma. Most of you do not know anything about Edmond, Oklahoma, except that I live here. But it can seem a lot like Camelot, right? Highest cost of living in the state of Oklahoma, lowest crime rate, best public school system, highest rate of people with college degrees. It's a great place to live. Basically, every magazine or periodical that judges the best place to grow up and raise a family, Edmond, Oklahoma at one time or another has been listed, believe it or not. And guess what? The dudes are clean and look nice. The women are super hot. They've typically been aided in that, right? They've had a lot of work done to keep up with the appearances and to be as anti-gravity as possible, if you know what I mean. Big, beautiful houses, manicured lawns, perfectly clean trucks and sports cars and SUVs, private schools everywhere, golf courses, lots of money, lots of prestige. Feels like Camelot. But right to my big takeaway on this one. Never assume that someone in your sphere of influence has accepted the gospel of Jesus Christ. Always share it. Especially if you live in the Bible Belt or in the South, here in the United States, where everyone just walks around assuming that everyone's a Christian. It's my country music theology thing. Well, I believe in God. I vote Republican when I vote. I was baptized when I was a kid. Grandmama and Grandpappy were good Christians, and I listen to country music, so I'm a Christian. That's not what Christians are. That's not what Christianity is. You are a Christian if you have repented of your life of sin and put your faith in the propitiation of your sin debt in that Jesus, when he died on the cross, accounted for you. Now, you may not be able to theologically elucidate that as well as, someone that you might like, but at the end of the day, that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening if you're a Christian. And so this woman lived in a very nice house. This was her adopted son. There's probably going to be more that comes out about what's going on with this relationship, but he beat her to death with a hammer. And if you read the rest of the report, apparently this kid had some significant issues with following the rules. His mom was trying to do some tough love on him. I don't know where the dad is or if the dad was in the picture at all or her husband, but this is someone that they welcome into their home to give this young man a chance at success and a chance at a good life. And he repaid that with the end of a hammer in his fists. And so I hope for the woman's sake, the mother's sake, that she had accepted Christ. And this young man certainly needs Christ. Can't imagine that he would act in that way if he had already accepted the free gift of grace that is offered by the gospel. But guys, I'm telling you, don't assume because people look good and because they have a nice car and they make a lot of money and take really nice vacations and they say things like God bless, that they're Christians. Share the truth of the gospel as revealed to you. Share why you have faith in Jesus Christ. Share why your entire life is different because you think that a Middle Eastern Jewish construction worker was also the Son of God that was sent here, died on a cross, was put in a grave that became a temporary residence because 3 days later he walked out of that grave, resurrected by God, and he's ascended to the right hand of the Father, and all we're waiting on is for him to come back and get his bride. You should be able to share that with people. It's really not that difficult. I would urge you and compel you to do so. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So don't forget, you can donate to us. And if you need a tax-deductible donation, there's a link to where you can donate to the Daily Blade. And then I've got a link to everything else we talked about in the main segment and the quick hitters. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And as always, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.